I was just thinking about it yesterday because I was listening to the Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan.
I haven't. I
Uh,
haven't yet.
yeah. Okay, I'm writing in my to-do list here. That's a great idea. Yeah, so he talked about how he spent most or a lot of time during the pandemic in Kauai, in Hawaii, and doing foiling and hydrofoiling or something in the morning and that kind of stuff, and just how it informed him. He's gotten into mixed martial arts as well, and like all of that. It's the being in your body and building your body, but it's also doing something that requires you to be totally focused as a counterweight to building a business, right? Running a business.
Yeah, I think that that's so important. I mean, that's what I've experienced with, everything from hiking, climbing, kayaking, anything that's outdoors. I know that's why so many of my friends do mixed martial arts and whatever is, you have no choice but to be wholly present and engrossed in something different that just your mammalian brain is just completely focused on that,
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. For me, riding a motorcycle in India was kind of that experience. Right.
Where in India were you? I bet that. Yeah, of course that is.
Right. Yeah. Especially because I've never ridden a motorcycle before, so I just bought one, and then I was like, I can figure out how this machine works. I had a friend just like show me the different shifters and stuff, and went off into Indian traffic and didn't have a license or anything. Just went at it. It was really fun. It was in Mysore, down south near Bangalore, and yeah, just went out. Just riding around the city, but also on some trips and stuff. It was really cool. But
so you did countryside rides and everything.
Yeah.
All right, tell me all about that trip. I want to hear. Let's start from the beginning. This is where we're going to start our podcast that you're running. But
Exactly.
That question needs to be answered for the sake of this podcast.
Wait, which part? The motorcycle part or the India part?
Just tell me about the whole trip in India.
We ended up in India. We lived in India for a whole year because our visa for the U.S. got denied, and then my wife was like, "Why don't we just move to India and do Ashtanga?" And I'm like, "That's what we're gonna do." And then I was like, "Wait, what is Ashtanga?" And she said, "Oh, it's a kind of yoga." Okay. Oh, so we have to get up every day at 3:30 and do yoga at 4, like 6 days. Really? Okay, I said yes. I said yes. Let's do it. So we went. It was super cool. And I hadn't really done any yoga before, so it was definitely a learning curve. And then I was down there and I saw all these cool Royal Enfield motorcycles. I was like, I want one of those. Bought one. And started riding it, and had a friend teach me. So he sat on the back and showed me for like an hour, and then I was off. And the craziest trip I went was we went on a 3-day road trip with an Indian friend, and it was during the monsoon. And we go up in the mountains and hairpin turns, and we hadn't timed it right, so it was dark and rainy. And going downhill in the hairpin turns, and riding in my side of the road, which is the left side, right? For India, so you're on the left side of the road, coming around a hairpin turn, and there's a bus coming up in my lane, full speed ahead, up that, all in the fucking turn. So you have to just pause, you have to be so alert and just off the road, just veer off the road and into the grass on the side of the road, right? And that happened 3 freaking turns, I kid you not, 3 turns in a row, different buses, obviously, but same me. And it's just okay, this is fun, right? And then we finally got past that mountain and out and into the village or town or whatever. On the other side, we're going to stay there for the night. And then they're like, all right, sir, we need to see your passport. And I'd forgotten to bring my passport. It was back home. And it was late. And I was like, do you think a picture will do? Or do I have to drive all the way 6 hours back in the middle? What the? Oh, God.
Oh my God. What ended up happening there?
So I call my wife. She doesn't pick up the phone. She's already in bed sleeping. Because we get up at 3:30 to go to yoga, right? So it's like at 6, 7 p.m. you're in bed. And then I call my other friend. I'm like, hey, who lives in that same town that we did, and he's like, could you go up by the house and try to wake her up? But don't freak her out because she's gonna have a panic attack. Like, so how do you do that? And I think like we ended up getting her woken up, and she was able to take a picture of my passport and send it to me, and they accepted that, and I got to stay at the hotel. And then it was like every night after that, it was like, is that picture gonna work or not? Like, we'll find out. It was kind of funky, but I love
that's intense.
I love the motorcycle part. It's like, is that like we talked about? You have to be hyper focused, hyper present, right? You have to be in that moment, not think about anything else. And what I found was that eventually the buses actually became my friends. I don't know. I developed some sort of spiritual connection with the buses because the buses were very interesting. They didn't give a fuck, right? Because they're bigger and badder than anybody else, and you drive on the freeway or like the highways, right? So people drive maybe like 80 kilometers per hour kind of thing. It's like, what is that, 50 or something? And then there's a bus coming full speed, and there's a cow ahead of the bus, and the cows are sacred and they walk everywhere. And so what does the bus do? He just veers off into the other lane and back in. And so you have to be aware of that and realize that, like, this bus coming at you, there's a cow there. He's going to veer into your lane. Like, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared for that, right? But eventually I really found that like, the buses became my friends, and it's like the bus drivers were looking out for me kind of thing. And it ended up being a very spiritual thing. I'm convinced that I've been an Indian rickshaw driver in a past life. Like, it felt very natural for me to just get into Indian traffic.
That's so interesting. Oh my God. That sounds amazing. It sounds completely immersive.
Exactly. And what's cool about it, it's like, one of my favorite things is thinking about fear. And there's a saying that fear is excitement with the breath held, right? And it's scary to ride that motorcycle there in the traffic. It is. I'm not gonna lie, right? And the most scary thing was actually being the passenger on someone else riding the motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
Because then I have no control and I can't really see anything because I got a person right there in front of me. And in those moments, it was literally, if today is the day that I'm going to die, that's going to be okay, right? I can't control this. I might die today, or I might get hurt and like fucked for life. And just finding that place of surrender, finding that place of surrender within myself, that I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That was super cool.
It is super powerful, and it's weird how those experiences where there is really no other option, right? But to accept that, it's weird how fear as we usually experience it, our breath held, kind of can melt away. And you're just like in this immersive experience where you have this heightened sense of awareness. And for me, I mean, people always think like climbing would be the same thing as like, something that like an adrenaline junkie would do or something. And whenever I've been climbing, all of that fear, and I actually I think naturally, I don't know if everyone is, but like I have fear of heights, of course, because you fall, you die, right? But like when climbing, it's interesting. Like you're in the middle of a cliff, and the fear really melts away completely, and that like your way is up, and so you just kind of keep going, right? And you're kind of like one same experience that you're talking about, like you're one with that face, right? That face of rock. It's so fascinating.
Well, so tell me, so I've never climbed, but I would imagine like in that situation, right? You're there in the middle of that wall, And if your mind goes to, oh shit, if I slip, if I trip, if I fall, this is gonna happen, and then the fear comes up in you.
Yeah, it can.
And then you're like, all right, focus right here, right now, right? So that demonstrates the power of our mind, right? The fear is really when we start projecting a future that we perceive as negative, and then that becomes the fear, and that becomes the physiological response as well.
Yeah. I mean, that almost, it really actually reminds me of, I don't know, I think you know this, I'm 15 years sober, and it actually just reminds me of sobriety, right? Is like, you start thinking too much about what can happen in the future. It's really, really easy to unravel. And so that's why there's the saying, one day at a time. And in climbing, it's just 1 second at a time.
Right. So connect the dots for me on the sobriety. Like, what is the thing that can happen in the future around sobriety?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally, sobriety's really, alcoholism and drug addiction is typically symptomatic of something much deeper, right?
Yeah.
Fears, anxieties, it's attached to all of these other things. And so, a lot of people that are in AA, the program, NA, are typically people that are extremely high anxiety, have some, emotional things that they have to work through, and they've been dampening them with drugs and alcohol. And so what sobriety looks like for them is, all of those things just completely let loose and unhinged. And so that's why they say, they call it, the one thing worse than being like an alcoholic is being a dry drunk and someone who's not working on themselves spiritually, but still has the personality of an alcoholic or an addict.
Totally.
Right?
I used to smoke a pack a day, and the one thing I didn't want to be was a smoker who didn't smoke. Right? Same thing.
That's super interesting. I want to hear more about that. But with all of that being said, when you start thinking about that's the personality work that you have to do in AA. So you just need to be able to get through this moment, this day without using. And also you need to be able to work on yourself, your emotional state, and personal growth in that day. But if you start projecting out into the future,
so it's
becomes
I don't know that I can handle if this or that happens without my drug, right? Without using.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, can I be in this moment right here without using?
Yes.
Am I okay right now? Right.
Yes. That's it.
And don't worry about being sober for a week or a month or a year or 10 years. Just worry about not drinking till I go to bed tonight.
That's it.
And then, no, and you know what? But that makes it's such a parallel for basically everything in life. Like these days, I'm working on getting my weight, my body fat down again. It's I'm fine, right? Like, but there's a place I want to get to. I just feel better when I'm a little more lean than I am now, and it's the exact same thing. There's some emotional eating pattern that I've been working on, but there's still some strings there. But then it's like, if I can just make it through the day without overeating or eating like crap and just go to bed, then like that's a win, right? It's the exact same damn thing.
Yeah. What are the triggers that typically drive you to eating? I have the same issue. That's my that's really my big one today in sobriety. Is my crutch becomes food, right?
Well, that's what always happens. It's like you move from crutch to crutch to crutch until you finally get to the bottom of whatever it is. I think for me, it's connection, and it really shifted a lot on this, my trip to Copenhagen in June, where I was able to connect with and release a bunch of feelings around my birth trauma. So, I was born strangled in my own umbilical cord, and that's something that came to me during a guided visualization 15 years ago, and I've worked on in different forms over the years, but this year it's really come up again as a thing to really release in new and different ways. It's been a theme for months now. And in this particular instance, I was doing body SDS treatment, and it was like an hour and 15 minutes of just crying out, like literally, an hour and 15 minutes of nonstop crying. And it was like this feeling that there was a vacuum hose inside of me just sucking up all the pain around this in different aspects, around around my heart and chest, around my throat, and around my lower belly. And so the therapist would basically just hold his hand in those different places, and I just cry and cry and cry. And that relieved a lot. And I could feel how that birth trauma had created a separation within me that then materializes in separation in relationships where I don't get fully close to people. And then there would be this need in me for connection, for feeling that closeness and connection. And food was a major way that I fed that need, that desire.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So typically that's really interesting. Typically, lack of human connection is a source of most addiction.
100%. Yeah.
We're meant to be connected to people.
Exactly.
We're meant to feel love and connection with other people.
Yeah. Who was it that coined it that way? Like the opposite of addiction is connection, or the answer?
Joe Polish.
Huh? Is that him?
Joe Polish, I think.
Yeah. But it's so true.
Yeah, I totally believe that. And I think that there are a lot of addictions that can help to fuel, anything you put in your body, which is food, is a drug, right? And so it can trigger chemical reactions that make you say temporarily, I'm okay, right? And that is how I typically deal with these things today is okay, I'm going to consume an egregious amount of grease, an egregious amount of food in order to dampen these, quote unquote, bad feelings that I'm experiencing.
Well, and every single time the answer is always to actually feel the feelings, right?
Yeah.
But it can be hard, and some of them are subtle, and they're buried deep underneath layers of defenses and whatnot, like just tension in your body. So it can be hard, but it's always the answer. I remember, I think I heard Tony Robbins talks about how people who overeat or use eating as a way to change your state, a lot of the times it's just actually eating changes your breathing pattern, or like it engages a different part of your body in that way, because and by just doing some deep breathing instead, you can get that same need met.
That actually makes sense, because when you eat, I'm sure it tells your brain that you're okay, because you can't eat if you're not okay. If you're being chased by a lion, you're not going to stop and eat a sandwich, so, and we do know that if you breathe, right, if you stop and you take deep breaths and you breathe through the moment, it tells your body you are okay. That's the whole reason behind the Navy SEAL box breathing, right? Is that it tells your body that you are okay to breathe in that type of a pattern. You couldn't do that.
Box breathing?
Yeah. It's it's 7 seconds in, and then like 10, and then 7 second hold, and then 10 to 12 seconds out, 7 second hold, 7 second in, right? Okay. And you just keep going in that kind of box, right?
Okay.
Breathing out more than you breathe in, longer than you breathe in. And it just completely calms.
Never heard it described as a Navy SEAL box breathing.
They'll use it in, especially so like in super cold conditions to regulate their body temperature. Right. They use those types of breathing patterns.
Which just brings us to someone like Wim Hof, right? Who's also controlling so much through mainly the breath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you cold plunge?
I don't cold plunge. I do cold showers every day, but it's in the summer here. It's not very cold. I want to have a cold plunge. I've actually tried to advocate for the building here that we get a cold plunge. There's a sauna, but there's no cold, so it's like missing half of the fun, right?
You should. You live in New York City, bro. You need a membership. That's all you need in New York City. I guarantee somewhere near you has to have a cold plunge, right?
Yeah, there's a bathhouse up here a few blocks away. They have a cold plunge, which is really nice. So I really like that.
Yeah. Is it like a Russian bathhouse or like what's the...
I've never been to that place. I want to go. Yeah.
Have you ever been to a Russian bathhouse?
Oh, no, I haven't either. No, but there's the Russian bathhouse in the East Village right over there that I've never been to.
I see. Yeah, that's a super interesting experience. I've done that in Russia. And I mean, basically they take branches like in the sauna and they put them on coals. So they get the branches wet and then they put oil and stuff on them. And then they put them on the coals and they get really hot. And then they kind of like slap your back with that, but it traps all the heat in. So it's super hot, like it to the point where it's kind of painful. And then you go and you jump in a cold plunge and it's like your entire body it's euphoric. Like, and I don't know if it's just like the pain releasing from your body or like what it is, but it's amazing.
Wow. No, I'll have to try that. I have to try that. So, tell me about like what are those? So what I'm focusing on in these conversations is a lot about the inner journey of entrepreneurship. So we've already talked a bunch of things of that nature. What are some of the ways in which you have had to confront parts of yourself on your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think that there are a number. I think there are a number of ways that I've had to confront myself. The one that really comes to mind right now is in entrepreneurship, it's almost impossible. I think people think of like, the biggest, most successful entrepreneurs or whatever being control freaks and extremely attached to control and controlling everything in their entire environment and, having all of these very specific regimens and all of this. And like all that might be true.
You mean like morning rituals and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, but I think that's more to create some consistency in their lives rather than because they're super driven. And I, personally letting go of, I was a control freak early on in my entrepreneurial career, and even before that. And I was so tight and so rigid that when something would go wrong, it would throw me completely off the tracks, right? And having the fortitude to be able to let go and let happen and to utilize, to make decisions more from my gut than from my brain has been absolutely huge for me. And so
so in those moments where you would be thrown off completely, what was happening in your mind?
Panic. I mean, it's like being on the side of that cliff, looking down and realizing, and then looking up and realizing that your rope, right, is not where it needs to be, right? Or
and what was, so in that moment where you're panicking, what was the story? We just talked about before, like when you're on that mountainside, right? If you start to focus on the future and you could fall and all that, then you get scared. So what was that story?
That the entire thing would unravel. So because I thought that everything had to be perfect, if this one thing goes wrong, then could it this and this and this and this and this? And it throws me completely outside of the moment, right? And the decisions that I need to be making in the moment in order to continue, And so that desire to be perfect can be absolutely crippling. Absolutely crippling.
It's crazy how many people suffer from some version of, wanting to be, needing to be perfect, without necessarily even having a clear picture of what the hell that means. Like, what was perfect for you?
I didn't know.
Right.
I had no idea what perfect was. Perfect was better than the version of myself in that moment, and better than everyone else around me. Right? I mean, like, it was competition with myself, competition with the next person, competition with the girl that I had a crush on in high school, competition with the, with the best friend across the street that was better at athletics when I was young, competition with my older sister, competition with my father. It was just a fear of not being able to outperform, and be a version of myself that was better than myself and better than others around me.
From whose perspective, though?
From their perspective, is who it was, right?
So,
is 100%. 100% is projecting their judgment on myself and living from their point of view. From your as I thought that they may perceive me.
Right, exactly, right. So the whole thing is you're making it up. You're making shit up that they in your mind that they judge you on, and then you judge yourself on it.
Yeah. Did you have similar experiences?
Yeah. Well, what it brings up for me is like the realization that I had at some point that every time I'm scared of other people's judgments, it's because I'm already judging myself in this exact way, right? Every time I'm scared of someone else's opinion of me, it's because I already hold this opinion. And I'm just afraid that they agree with me. Right?
How have you found yourself healing from that specific brand of trauma?
Let me think. I think it's been owning the judgment, right? Recognizing that it's not about them, it's about me judging myself. And then finding that part of me, that little boy that felt so wrong that he had to internalize that judgment for whatever reason, and having a conversation with him, telling him that it's like I love him and he's great just the way he is, and he doesn't need to hold that responsibility anymore of making sure that I stay on the straight and narrow, that I'm good enough, that I live up to whatever his idea was. It's like he's frozen in time with that judgment, and I need to release him and set him free.
That's so interesting. So interesting how long we hold on to the opinions of young versions of ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Crazy. Yeah.
Isn't that nuts?
But it's also
didn't
beautiful.
realize until last year that my version of success was what I had decided success looked like when I was 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what? I'm letting a 20-year-old make a decision for me on what success to me looks like at 35? Like, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. We do that. Yeah, we totally do that. I just had today, so I use a variety of different modalities to do inner work. Just a few hours ago, I had a session with my hypnotist, and working on something very related to this, actually. And I find that too. I don't know if you do, but like some of those same themes are come up again and again and again, and you just kind of peel different layers off of them, right?
Yeah.
It's never just one and done, and it's taken care of. It's just keep digging, and there's always going to be, not always, but there's multiple layers. But this one was about fear of judgment for my views and my opinions. So I had, hold some fairly controversial views on, life and humanity and, the world of health and medicine and politics and all that kind of stuff. And I'm nervous. There's a part of me that's scared about being completely, I've been deliberately public about my opinions, but there's definitely situations where I hold back and where I filter myself. I think there's a part of it that's natural and normal and healthy, but there's also a part that's where there is that emotional thing. So I was digging into that, and I've had previously during some guided visualizations, I've had some like visions of past lifetimes come up. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but where it was like being a medicine man or something in a tribe, like at some point years and years ago, and being kicked out for being, for ruffling too many feathers and being too controversial.
It sounds like you.
Yeah. and that was like, and then dying a painful death alone, kicked out of the tribe, and a time where you can't survive outside the tribe. So that was a painful memory. What was that?
That's so intense. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And there's been there's lots of instances like that when I've gone into those kinds of places. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that one of the things that I love about you, where we met at Baby Bathwater, right?
We did not know. We met at Jarrett's.
Oh, that's right.
In Atlanta, yeah.
Yeah, we met in Atlanta.
We met in a bowling alley in Atlanta.
We met at a bowling alley in Atlanta. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And we were the first ones there. We actually started to go deep right away.
Can I be honest with you? Can I tell you something I don't think I've ever told you before?
Please.
About that meeting?
Yeah.
I met Jarrett, I forgot, 6 months prior to that. And I was like a little skeptical. I was like, he looks a little dorky, I love Jarrett. He's fantastic. But my first impression was like, he looked a little dorky. And then he invited me down to Atlanta. I was like, flying it down there and all that stuff. I wasn't sure what that was. Was it kind of my level? It seemed like it was a little lower level than where I'm at my journey and whatnot. I get to that bowling alley and I see you sitting there and you're like really slumped in your chair and you've got this like long greasy hair and like your beard and all that. I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I was just like, this is not my. And then we sit down and we start talking and like we just became really fast friends. But it was just.
I don't think you're alone in that experience of me.
Probably, possibly not.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that. I've heard that type of thing several times before, and I think that it's really interesting. People love to put a label on what success looks like today, right? And what it is that a successful person looks like today. And on the surface, I certainly don't meet people's expectation of that. And so I was at a wealth summit maybe last week. And, a guy said he walked in and basically saw me and he goes, and then they do a hot seat on financials, cash flows, all that stuff up in front of everyone. And I remember on the other side of that him going, what? Like, that is not, exactly what I expected of you. And so there's definitely a divide between the way that I look and my obsession with leveraging capitalism to create.
Yeah. And you're just holding on to that image just out of spite, just to show people.
Like, fuck you guys.
Right. If you look at, the whole Silicon Valley kind of culture is similar in that sense, right? Like, there's there's a level where you dress up to show that you're something, and then when you're really made it, you show up in a hoodie and sneakers, right?
Yeah. You're the guy that shows up in a hoodie and sneakers. Yeah, no, that's exactly. I think that people have just become tired of the same old story of what it is. And I was the guy that wore a suit in finance for 10 years.
Got it.
And was extremely clean cut. What?
Yes, you know how one works.
Yeah, I do. I can tie, a single Windsor, a double Windsor. I know all of the things. I know what watch goes with what shoes. I know all of these things, right? I choose to.
I know nothing of those things. I don't know anything. I don't think I've ever owned a suit, like ever.
Really?
Yeah. I have a couple sport jackets, and I've definitely worn a tux for some weddings and stuff, but I don't think I've ever owned a suit. I just bought one this weekend because I've started working with a stylist, and the guy named Tanner Guzzi. He's amazing. He doesn't style you; he teaches you style, and how to do things. And he's it's just blown my mind so much. So I went shopping for a suit for a wedding that I'm going to in Copenhagen, and dude, I'm loving it. It's so much fun when you get into it. I'm really noticing how changing how I dress changes my image. And that was always my mom, when I was younger, always wanted for graduation and stuff, she wanted me to be in a nice suit, and I would always be I don't like this. I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel comfortable. I was I'm gonna wear sneakers with this nice clothes you bought me and whatnot. It's I would show up to fancy places in a fancy clothes, but then I'd wear sneakers with it. And I really surprised myself here by actually buying a pair of brown double monks, and I didn't know what that was literally 2 weeks ago.
I love it. Well, yeah, it certainly can make you feel good about yourself, right? And it can make you feel, aligned with, a certain version of yourself. After 10 years, I've fully explored that version. A decade of that shit was enough.
Well, I think it's also if you do it because that's what's expected and that's the environment and all of that stuff. That's a different thing, right? I'm gonna do this show up to a wedding and probably be. I'm definitely gonna be the best dressed person in that at that event, because there's not people who care, but to me it's fun. I care, and to me it's interesting. My only concern is outshining the groom, but I've been assured that that's not an issue here. Like, he'd just be proud of me. It's my father-in-law, so I'm trusting that.
I love that. Scandinavian man in a suit is a good look. A slender Scandinavian man in a suit is a good look.
That's what I'm going for. Yeah, I'll send you pictures. So, yeah. What were we talking? We're talking about the looks. You were about to say something about, like, we met in Atlanta, or whatnot.
What I was just going to say is, I believe that where I was going is very specific to baby bathwater. I guess we hung out second time. We were in New Orleans at a baby bathwater event, and that is a place, right? That is a place where you find the weirdest, oddest entrepreneurs in existence on the planet, and you figure out that for the most part, once people achieve a certain amount of financial success, they kind of do say, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to be the version that feels most in alignment with myself. And you find some interesting, wild versions of people there.
Yeah. No, it's a great group. And I love that. Yeah, for me, it's all about, like, how do we become the truest, most potent expression of who we really are? And it's going to evolve all the time. We're alive. Everything that's alive is always evolving, but it's like not limiting it to one version, right? So for me, this whole dressing up game has just been a version of me that I have never, like, dare to explore, right? So that opens up a new facet, a new instrument to play. But yeah, it's like never getting locked into one way of being, right? You going using DeSober is a huge unlock.
What do you feel like is the most aligned version of Calvin right now? What's your dharma right now? What's the universe calling to you?
Yeah, it's for me, what really draws me is unlocking people's life force. I had this vision that came to me back when I was in high school, and I remember it was weird. It was like this image came to me, and it just changed. It was like the world opened up for a week, and I saw everything differently. It was like I was there, I wasn't fully there. So the image was this fire, this flame that burns inside of us, that is our life force energy, our sexual energy, our creative energy. And then we toss shit on top of it, right? Of, like, limiting beliefs and, insecurities and, like, whatever we do to our bodies and all that stuff that gets put on us by our parents, our environment. We bring it on, then we internalize it, and we just keep living that way. And our job is to peel all those pieces away so that fire can burn bright, right? And when we clog it up, that's when we get depressed and diseased, and diseased, right? Like, sick and unhealthy in all kinds of ways. And I really believe that basically all injuries all diseases can be cured just by doing that, just by removing those layers, and then love and movement and all of that then, like, everything gets taken care of. Eventually we're gonna die, but that's fine. So yeah, unpeeling those layers. And it was really wild because then for that week, it was like, I remember going around and I'd see everybody and what they were doing, and I was like, oh, I know I see how the way she's acting and speaking, but she's just really insecure, and this is kind of the dialogue inside of her head, and this is what she really is really trying to say, or really trying to get, or what she's really needing. And it was like I could kind of see beneath the surface of everybody for a week. It was crazy.
That's nuts. And when was this?
It was like I was 16, 17. It was in high school.
Wow. That's nuts.
Yeah.
When I was 16, 17, I was smoking pot on the bleachers. I wasn't thinking about this shit.
Same. Different. Yeah. Yeah.
If I was thinking about that, I don't remember.
Right. And one of the things that came up for me in this hypnosis session I had earlier today was the part of me that's defensive. Tell me if this resonates with you, but it's something that I can see in myself and I see it in other people where, like, there's two sides. There's the part of me that's soft and vulnerable and genuine, that wants to come out and wants to connect. But then there's the other part of me that's protective and defensive. And it's kind of putting up some resistance, right? Some defense to protect me. And I really want to connect from this part, the soft and genuine part. But maybe you're doing something that's activating this piece, and I'm just like trying to dance with it. Like I want to get in there, but this is coming up. Does that resonate at all?
It resonates massively for me. I felt like when I was that version of myself working in finance, wearing a suit, very focused on success, very focused on what other people thought of me, that there was a whole lot of me holding on to this I was in a very protective state all the time, and I didn't even know it. And there was such a lack of vulnerability involved in that. And for me, it took almost a nervous breakdown to really realize that I needed to let go of all of that. So I had a very, I grew up in a family where all of the men were super hyper masculine, right? And my dad was a D1 athlete. My uncles were D1 athletes. My grandpa was the head of athletic medicine for the University of Nebraska. So I grew up in a very sport-centered family. I played 3 sports poorly. I was so dedicated that, I did play on, the select teams and, all of those things. But I was never up to par because of my lack of natural ability in those spaces. It's not what I was born to do. And I carried that into adulthood and into my career and trying to achieve. And it wasn't until I really let go of that and started to open up, be vulnerable, and be okay with the fact that there is this softer side of me that absolutely needed to be expressed, right? And that is one of the most powerful things I've ever done, is allow that side of me out to be expressed, and to not hold on to that. And now I'm actually working on how is it that I balance better, right? How is it that I be in better balance? And so now I'm going to be over the next year.
So I want to hear about the balance. I want to double click on what you said of like letting that softer part of you out. And was that like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that part of you always wanted out, but something was holding it stuck, holding it hostage, right?
Yeah, it was society. I mean, it was what I perceived to be society's expectations of me.
Uh-huh.
To be, a hyper masculine, athletic,
Uh-huh.
three-sport athlete,
Uh-huh.
bang on the chest guy.
Right.
And I did pretend to be that guy for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's hard for you to even to even envision. But
No,
I
I was
pretended.
laughing at the pretend part, but I do want to see pictures, yeah.
I will. I'll show you some pictures.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because I love that. Like whenever we have that, I don't know how conscious it was that it was you pretending to be that person, or whether that was in hindsight you could see that you were pretending. But for me, there's been a lot of the latter, where it's like, oh shit, like looking back, I can see how much I was pretending. And whenever that's the case, right, that's a huge sign that yeah, something needs to shift here.
Yeah, I can look back on it and see, right? Like it in the moment, I just wasn't awake enough, right? To know. I just didn't have the information to be able to see it.
And that's so I've been thinking about that. If we zoom out, like way out for a second, right? Like the way something that I think about a lot is how we organize ourselves as people, as a society. And it's, if you just like, we look around, I'm sitting here looking out at New York City, we got Empire State Building over there and all that stuff. And people on the street and all, and we're like, oh yeah, this is normal. Right? This is like, yeah, like money to buy stuff, and you go to the supermarket, and some people have money, some people don't, and some people have a lot, some people have a little, like all that stuff. Like, that's normal. It's just the way it is. Like, I'm not saying that's good or bad or right or wrong, but it's like, it's not like nothing about it is normal, right? Like it's I mean, it is in the sense that it's the norm here, right? But it's like, how did it end up this way? And like, when there's someone who's suffering and homeless on the street and don't have any money, or they're on drugs or have mental issues or whatever, that's like, yeah, like, get out of my way, let me walk over you and like get to my thing that I need to go. It's like, that's like, like something ain't quite right here, and like, how do we solve that? But you kids grow up in this world and they're like, oh, this is how it is. Like, and just like that we pay, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of our money to the government to basically squander on whatever the fuck shit they want to squander it on, and steal it and rape and pillage, and like, it's normal, and like the government is in control of schools and education, and that's normal. It's like all these things that we take for granted as normal, which are all really weird when you stop to think about it, right?
It is all extremely weird. I mean, born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska, questioning things is not like normal here, right? So like when like it's, but I mean, I've always wondered, you're exactly right. None of this is normal. None of this, like, what do you mean, like, this is normal? What a weird fucking experience. Have you ever just thought about what you are? Some bag of flesh just floating on a planet in the middle of a universe. Like, it's fucking wild.
Going 67,000 miles an hour around the fucking sun, right?
Yeah, and somehow, yeah, all of these things were organized by cooperation, I suppose, among human beings, deciding that this is the best way to do things. And there's a massive amount of change, but we don't consider the fact that every single time, a single factor changes in an equation, that should probably change what our answer is, right? And that happens every millisecond on this fucking planet. And so, I mean, prescribing to almost anything as definite truth to me is just a very wild concept. It's like, how
Right.
could you, right?
And my point of that story was also to say, like, you growing up and like just like, oh, this is how we behave around here. We have to be these alpha male, like sports people, whatever, achievers. Okay, I'm just gonna play that game. That's every kid's experience, right? That's all of our experience growing up. Oh, yes, we have, like, we use these thing called money, or like now it's on the like Apple Pay on the phone to get stuff, and then like you sit on your computer and do shit, and then like that gives you things on this computer so that you can pay for them. They're like, like all that stuff, that all this construct, kids grow up and like, all right, this is how it is. Like, and then I think a big part for me is getting people to that point where they start asking questions and start looking for answers. And I have no stake in what answers people come up with, as long as there is genuine curiosity and looking around for answers, right? Like
Looking around for answers and seeking true alignment.
Yeah.
With
answers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you put all of my friends in a room together, it would be the weirdest fucking experience ever, right? And like almost no one would agree on anything, but they'd probably all be best friends, right? Like, I mean, just like you're a wildly weird person, right? Like, I like you. You're a wildly weird person. We don't agree on anything, right? But I like talking to you about it.
I think that there's the key distinction there, I think, is values versus opinions, right? If we have shared values, that's what makes us be like, okay, I like you, even though if we disagree on like specifics, who cares? And I think that's the same thing for me with what I talked about before with my team and with other people in my audience, etc., where I think a lot of people in my environment disagree with me on specifics, but I do think that there is a set of core values that makes it work. I have someone on my team that I'm very close with that I love and rely on, and we have radically different political positions, but we love having those conversations too, because we learn from each other. And we've actually talked about, and we're gonna have to do that sooner rather than later, doing a show where we would talk politics from our different perspectives. All right, so we would take an article or a video or something and both read or watch and then discuss it from our different perspectives.
I love that. There's my favorite course in college was called Informal Logic. And what we did was everyone had to bring a subject, and it had to be two opposing media outlets, and they had to bring both outlets. And then it was about distilling down and crossing out everything that was opinion, that wasn't fact, and then cross-referencing and having a conversation over that distilled version. It was the best.
That is so good.
It was amazing.
During my political awakening, about 5 years ago, one of the things I would do is I would read articles from CNN or Washington Post or New York Times, and I would go through and distill out everything that is opinion and speculation and stipulation and like what are the actual facts of the stories. And my conclusion, I didn't do two opposing, but my conclusion was, in 90% of the cases, there was like a half factoid buried in the 8th paragraph. And everything else was just like
bullshit.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just bullshit. It's just adopting other people's opinions for the most part. I don't know if you know this. I was in politics for some time.
I didn't know.
And yeah, I worked in the U.S. Senate for, I wasn't anyone, but I was like a political staffer and a Senate staffer. And, on the other side of that, I just completely decided like politics are out of my life.
Right.
Like they don't serve me. All I do is get stressed when I'm involved in them. It's humans like working against other humans is like the basic nature of it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, as opposed to that, like I find that, that capitalism is one of the greatest forms of cooperation as opposed to politics.
100%.
And
100%.
that I love the momentum that can happen in capitalism through alignment, and I hate the resistance that can happen in politics. And as soon as politics starts to seep into capitalism, I fucking hate it.
And it's there. Hey, time check, because like we're up on, but I've got more time, and I love this conversation. I'd love to keep going. I don't know what your schedule's like on this Monday.
Yeah, I have 15 more minutes.
Okay,
that's cool.
Cool. Yeah. And you know what I'd love to do is do more of this with you in person. I love this conversation. It's so good. But have you come out to New York? I'll get a film crew. We'll sit down. We'll actually do it in person.
That sounds amazing. I'm ready. I've got. Let's do it sometime in like November.
Yeah, and we'll meet in DR in Cabarete also in October.
Yeah.
So before we do that, I want to double click on another few topics. You mentioned the overachieving, masculine, driving, sports guy version of you. I know that one of the top conversations that you and I have had in the past has been around that masculine and feminine balance when it comes to us as humans, as men, and as entrepreneurs. So where are you at with that? What has your experience been? Yeah.
Well, where I'm at with that is, so I'm going through. This is a very delicate subject, I guess. But right now, I'm going through divorce, and my wife and I are still the best of friends. We absolutely care for and love each other, but it's time for us to separate at this moment in our lives to live our own unique experiences. And for her, that's staying where it is that we live today. And for me, that's going and exploring the world and what it has to offer for the next couple of years. So I'm diving into a very digital nomad lifestyle, literally not having a home base and doing the Airbnb thing and traveling the world. And that is, to very much re-engage, right, with and find the balance between my masculine and feminine is a core component of the work that I'm planning on doing through that experience, right? And so, hanging out and working and living, in Nepal and in Lisbon and in the Philippines and exploring the territories around those. And also doing the same, exploring the territories, that exist within me through that experience. And putting myself in a very, an explorative, masculine journey, right? That's a very masculine journey.
That's a good question, because like to the way I think of it is this exploration, the adventure, and all that stuff. That's actually the feminine energy, whereas the masculine is much more goal directed. Like, here's where we're going, and we're going to go there, and then there, and then there, right? And both are super valuable approaches, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that is. The exploration portions There's the explorative, like kind of like side of that, which is kind of like the wayward, just lollygagging wherever you go, you go. And then there's also, the experience of the expeditions that are involved in that, right? And so the very specific goals associated with, climbing in the Dolomites, right? Summiting certain mountains, sailing certain waters, those things. The goal-oriented portion of that is definitely what's masculine.
Yeah. All right. That is cool. And I have a note here that I double clicked on something where you're about to talk about balance. So you talked about how you had been doing that driving sports thing, and then like pulled back from that, and now you're finding more balance. Is that what you were talking about just now?
Yeah. I mean, I think right now I think that I actually found a lot more of my feminine side over a period of time. And now, in this next stage, it's important for me to get back in touch with more of the masculine side.
Right.
More of my
that
masculine.
would make sense, right? Because you felt like that masculine was like a straitjacket and it was being enforced upon you, and you're like, fuck that shit, I'm out. And then the pendulum swings in the other way, right? And then which is great, you develop that whole feminine side. I did that too. And then you come back and like, okay, what are the good parts of this masculine? Let me integrate both and build. Yeah. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And so, so has your journey looked similar?
Yeah. Well, I was never the hard driving masculine, right? For me, it was very, very early on. I was really scared of my dad and felt very rejected by him. And so I aligned with my mom. I wanted to be more like her, so I became a very feminine guy, feminine boy, to the point where in my first marriage, I literally was playing out. We tend to always play out our parents' marriages in our own marriages, except I had flipped the role. So I was playing the part of my mom. I was projecting the part of my dad onto my wife, and it wasn't working very well. Yeah. And so it was about 5 years ago that I woke up to realizing this about myself, and I started to building my masculine side. And my feminine side has only gotten bigger from that. Like once you build that masculine and you give it more structure and direction and focus and clarity, like that the feminine just gets better and better. But it's a thing for me to be mindful of. I have a tendency to fall into some of my feminine patterns, which is okay, but not always what is needed and helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's super interesting.
Yeah. And for me, a huge part of it has been the physical part. Building my body, building muscle, strength, exercise, all that stuff. It's just, as a man, you have to lift. You have to. You have to build muscle. You just have to.
I'm in such a better place when I lift. I mean, and I tend to forget that sometimes, I go and I lift, and I am a different person, right? When I work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of it, a huge part of it for me has been to connect with that little boy who was scared of his dad and didn't want to be like his dad. And who was also scared. I was scared of my own power because I perceived my dad as being very powerful, and that felt very hurtful to me. And so I didn't want to be powerful. So I had to dissociate from my own power.
That's very interesting. I mean, I think it's very possible through experiencing, more of a toxic version of masculinity, to try to dissociate completely with masculinity, right? As men, because of shame, right? You feel a certain amount of shame, and just being associated with that, and you're conflating what healthy and unhealthy looks like at that point.
100%. Right. Yes. Yeah. And as kids, I think we just project onto our parents, right? Like of the same sex. Like that's what man and masculinity is. And you look at your mom, that's what, being feminine is. And we don't think about this. It's all unconscious.
Right.
Yeah, that's how we do it. I don't tend to say this a lot because it might get me in trouble, but I think probably 98%, I'm just putting that number out there, but I think 98% of trans kids are just pissed that they're same-sex parent. That's my theory. I don't know. I'm just, but like the idea that like you're really like, you're so resentful and so upset with your at an unconscious level or conscious with your same-sex parent that you just so much don't want to be like them that you then like seek the opposite.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that or pretend, I don't know anything about that experience.
I'd be curious to go to find out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I do think that there's a ton of trauma associated with being, LGBTQ plus in general, and that society has created some boxes that people are supposed to operate in and live within. And I know my experience as like a cis male, person that is straight, that I've personally had struggles with, this experience of being in this body, being what society thinks I'm supposed to be. And so I can't imagine what it would be like to be, to feel completely as if you're in the wrong body.
Right. But yeah. But I think your point exactly of like, it's part of the human condition to feel like we have to fit in and we're wrong in some way and there's expectations and like what box do I like, being an entrepreneur, being it like whatever the fuck, like it's like I think that's the setup and that's the norm, that we're all here to find our own place and nobody's gonna can do that for you. And society's not going to do that for you because it's not how it works. And in some ways, it's part of my vision of what I would love to create in society is to create a society that actually invites people and has that level of curiosity. It's kind of like if you're a parent, right? You have your kids and you're like, let me get to know this kid versus let me shape this kid. And but maybe it's just one of the things that perspectives that I like to put out is everything is perfect exactly the way it is, right? Everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. And so maybe this is not a flaw that society doesn't care or, I mean, that's the other part is like, nobody gives a shit at the end of the day. Like whether you're, whatever, like nobody really gives a crap. Like your parents might have their opinions, but whatever, they're just people. But maybe it's part of the perfection of the universe of life that we have to struggle against something to break through and really be who we are, no matter what.
Yeah. I think that's the most true answer to what it actually means to be human. Right? Is, what are the things that you're going to struggle against in order to find your place where, and I actually think that struggle is, I mean, for me personally, where I actually do find comfort in who I am is the struggle itself, right? Is in the seeking, my higher power is the unknown, and seeking the unknown and trying to understand it and knowing that I won't, that there are so many things that I'm just not going to understand. And that truth is often a moving target. And so, finding whatever it is, I think that some people do have a self that stands still, right? And this is who I am, right? And they find that. And for me, it's like this ever moving concept, right? It's always changing.
Yeah, there's human design. I don't know if you've looked into human design at all. You familiar?
No.
It's a fascinating. Check it out. Human design. It's a system based on astrology about how humans work, and it's got some really fascinating insights. But one of them is so there's I think 9 centers. One of them is the G center. They're sort of like chakras, but not exactly, and there's 9 of them. The G center is the center for that sense of self, of identity. And the way human design works is each of these 9 centers can either be open or defined. So colored or white in the model. But bottom line is if you have an undefined G center, you don't have a clear sense of self. And if you do, you do. Right? If you have a defined G center, you know exactly who you are, and that's it. It's fixed. Each of these, when you're defined, you're kind of transmitting, and when you're open, you're sensing. So it's not good or bad or right or wrong. But if you're born, and it sounds like I have an open G center, it sounds like you would be in that same category. It makes us very perceptive of other people, but also a little bit lost in terms of like who am I and what do I want? And what am I in? Like, it's shifting. And maybe I have an emotional authority, which means I go on waves emotional. I'm like up and down, and like the waves can span multiple days or just be very short, and like waves on top of waves. And so, like, who I am today and like who I am tomorrow morning might be like different people, kind of thing, right? Because the two combine as well. So, yeah, totally.
Wow, that's so interesting. I'm gonna look into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, dude, I gotta jump. I have a meeting that started 1 minute ago. But it's all right. Dude, I want to continue this conversation. Of course, you're the best. I love you, man.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on this. I'm glad that it just felt like one of our conversations.
Yeah, it's the best. Hey, I wanted to ask you one quick thing before we end, which is, can you give people a quick sense of where you're at financially, just because it and business success wise? Because I think it might help lend some weight to everything. Yeah.
Financially for me, a lot's changing right now in separation, but I have several businesses that do multi-hundred thousands of dollars a year, and then one that does seven figures a year. I have one very specifically that's growing extremely fast, that's in that 5-figure place, that I think will be, doing, 4 million, 5 million over 2023, maybe even more. And so that's kind of where I sit.
That's exciting, man. Yeah. You're definitely super smart. I'm actually, we need to talk about with Fumas. I'm starting to do some things that would be relevant for you guys.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that later. I want to hear. Does it have to do with this podcast with your personal brand?
Somewhat, yeah. All right, we'll talk about it later, man.
All right, sounds good. All right, later.
I'm so grateful for this great conversation. Can't wait to see you in Caparete and onwards.
So, thanks, bro.
Enjoy.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.